You will marry Darian Blackwell in 3 weeks. Evelyn Thorne's teacup shattered against the hardwood floor of the plantation house parlor. The delicate porcelain scattered like her hopes, fragments catching the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "Excuse me." Her voice came out strangled. Surely she had misheard her father. Augustus Thorne stood behind his mahogany desk, his weathered hands gripping a stack of legal documents. His usually composed demeanor had cracked, revealing deep lines of exhaustion and something else. Fear. "The Magnolia Springs plantation is 3 months away from foreclosure, Evelyn. Our debts have reached impossible numbers." He set the papers down with trembling fingers. "This marriage arrangement is our only option." "Marriage arrangement?" Evelyn rose from her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You mean you're selling me?" "Don't be dramatic. Then explain to me how agreeing to marry a stranger for money is anything other than that." Augustus walked to the window overlooking the sprawling grounds that had been in their family for 4 generations. The magnolia trees were beginning to bloom, their white petals a stark contrast to the decay creeping through the estate's foundations. "Darian Blackwell is hardly a stranger. Our families have history." "What kind of history?" Evelyn demanded. "You've never mentioned any Blackwells before." Her father's shoulders tensed. "Old obligations, Evelyn. Debts that go back further than just money." "What does that mean?" "It means we don't have a choice." Augustus turned back to face her, and Evelyn was struck by how much older he looked than his 55 years. "The wedding is set for the 23rd at Ravens Hollow in Savannah. And if I refuse, then we lose everything. The plantation, our name, our future." His voice dropped. "Your mother would never have wanted that." Evelyn's chest tightened at the mention of her mother. Cordelia Thorne had died in a car accident when Evelyn was 12, leaving behind a grieving husband and daughter who had never quite recovered from the loss. "Don't bring mother into this." She understood sacrifice, Evelyn. She understood that sometimes we must make difficult choices for family. "This isn't a difficult choice, father. This is you trading your daughter like livestock." Augustus flinched. "Darian Blackwell is a respected businessman. Wealthy, influential. You could do far worse. I could also do far better by choosing for myself. Choice is a luxury we can no longer afford." Evelyn moved closer to the desk, studying her father's face. There was something he wasn't telling her, something beyond financial ruin that had driven him to this desperate measure. "How do you even know Darian Blackwell? Really know him?" Augustus picked up a silver letter opener, turning it over in his hands. "I told you, our families have history." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting." The conversation hit a wall, as they always did when she pressed him about the past. Just like when she asked about the details of her mother's accident. Just like when she questioned why they had no extended family, no old friends who visited. Augustus Thorne had built walls around certain subjects, and he defended them fiercely. "Show me the debt papers," Evelyn said. "What? If we're truly facing financial ruin, show me the documentation. I want to see exactly how much we owe and to whom." Augustus hesitated, then pulled a folder from his desk drawer. Evelyn snatched it before he could change his mind, scanning the figures that made her stomach drop. The numbers were staggering, far beyond what the plantation could reasonably accrue in normal circumstances. "How did we get this deep in debt?" she asked. "These aren't normal operating expenses. Business investments that didn't pan out." "What kind of investments?" "The kind that are none of your concern." Another wall. Evelyn wanted to scream with frustration. Her entire life was being upended, and her father continued to speak in riddles and half-truths. "I won't do it," she said finally. Augustus looked up sharply. "Evelyn, I won't marry a stranger to fix problems you won't even explain to me. You will do this because you're a Thorne, and Thorns honor their obligations." "What obligations? To whom?" Her father's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "To the living and the dead." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. "What does that mean?" "It means the decision is made." Augustus moved to the window again, dismissing her. "Victoria Ashford will arrive tomorrow to help you prepare. The dress has already been ordered. You planned this without consulting me at all. I planned this to save our family." Evelyn stared at her father's back, this man who had raised her with stories of strong Southern women who forged their own paths. Now he was asking her to abandon everything she believed about independence and choice. "And if I run?" "You won't." Augustus turned back to her, and for a moment, she saw something that looked almost like pity in his eyes. Because despite everything, you love this place. You love our family's legacy. And you're too much like your mother to let it die without a fight. He was right, and they both knew it. Magnolia Springs wasn't just property. It was generations of Thorne history, memories of her mother, the only home she had ever known. The thought of losing it felt like losing the last connection to Cordelia Thorne. "I hate you for this," she whispered. Augustus nodded slowly. "I know. And someday, I hope you'll forgive me." Evelyn left the parlor without another word, her mind reeling. 3 weeks to marry a stranger. 3 weeks to say goodbye to any future she had imagined for herself. As she climbed the curved staircase to her room, she passed the portrait of her mother that hung in the hallway. Cordelia Thorne gazed down with kind eyes and a gentle smile, wearing the ornate silver necklace that had been buried with her. For the first time, Evelyn noticed something she had never seen before. The pendant of her mother's necklace bore an intricate symbol, almost like a family crest. It looked oddly familiar, though she couldn't place where she had seen it before. Soon, she realized with a sinking heart, she would have plenty of time to solve such mysteries. As Mrs. Darian Blackwell, Evelyn's hands shook as Victoria Ashford fastened the final pearl button on the wedding dress. The ivory silk felt like a burial shroud against her skin. "Stop fidgeting," Victoria commanded, her voice sharp with authority. The older woman had arrived at Magnolia Springs exactly as Augustus promised, taking over wedding preparations with military precision. "You look beautiful. Darian is a lucky man." "Lucky isn't the word I'd use," Evelyn muttered. Victoria's reflection appeared beside hers in the antique mirror. The woman was stunning in an intimidating way, with platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon and ice blue eyes that seemed to catalog every weakness. "Marriage is what you make of it, dear. Some women find happiness in submission." Evelyn turned sharply. Submission? To their circumstances. To their duties. Victoria adjusted the veil with practiced hands. "Fighting the inevitable only brings misery. You sound like you speak from experience." Something flickered across Victoria's face before the composed mask returned. "I've learned that romantic ideals are luxuries most women can't afford." The drive to Ravens Hollow took 2 hours through Georgia's coastal lowlands. Evelyn sat in the back of the hired car while Augustus stared out the window, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Her father had been unusually quiet since Victoria's arrival, speaking only when necessary and avoiding eye contact with his daughter. Ravens Hollow emerged from a canopy of ancient oak trees like something from a Gothic novel. The mansion sprawled across manicured grounds, its dark stone facade decorated with intricate carvings that seemed to watch their approach. Towers rose from each corner, and massive windows reflected the late afternoon sun like watching eyes. "Impressive," Victoria commented from the front seat. "The Blackwell family has excellent taste." Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The house felt familiar in a way that made no sense. As if she had seen it before in dreams she couldn't quite remember. Guests were already assembled in the main hall when they arrived. Evelyn recognized a few faces from Charleston society events, but most were strangers. Wealthy strangers, judging by their clothes and jewelry. The kind of people who moved in circles far above anything the Thornes could afford. And then she saw him. Darian Blackwell stood at the front of the room beneath an archway of white roses, and Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. He was taller than she had expected, with dark hair and sharp features that belonged on magazine covers rather than in her real life. When their eyes met across the crowded room, something electric passed between them. He looked as trapped as she felt. The ceremony passed in a blur of meaningless words and hollow traditions. Evelyn heard herself speak vows she didn't mean to a man she didn't know, while her father watched from the front row with an expression she had never seen before. Not relief or satisfaction, but something closer to guilt. When the minister declared them husband and wife, Darian's hands were gentle as he lifted her veil. His dark eyes searched her face as if looking for answers to questions he couldn't voice. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. Before she could ask what he meant, his lips brushed hers in a kiss that was supposed to be ceremonial but felt like a promise instead. The reception blurred together in a series of congratulations from strangers and toasts that celebrated a union everyone knew was business rather than love. Evelyn moved through the evening like an actress playing a role, smiling when expected and making polite conversation while her new husband watched her from across the room. It wasn't until the guests began departing that she overheard the conversation that changed everything. She was returning from the powder room when she heard Augustus's voice coming from the study, the door slightly ajar. "Now we're even," her father was saying. "Are we?" Darian's voice was cold, controlled. 23 years doesn't balance in 3 weeks of marriage preparations. Your sister made her choice, just as Evelyn has made hers. My sister was murdered. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Sister? Murder? That was never proven, Augustus replied. Because you made sure it wouldn't be. I made sure my family survived, just as you're making sure yours continues to thrive. This arrangement protects Evelyn as much as it serves my purposes. Remember that. Footsteps approached the door, and Evelyn hurried away before she could be discovered. Her mind raced with questions as she climbed the grand staircase to the master suite where she was expected to spend her wedding night. The bedroom was elegant and intimidating, with a massive 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking the ocean, and antique furniture filled the space with old-world luxury. Evelyn was examining a collection of jewelry displayed on the vanity when Darian entered. She tensed, expecting awkwardness or demands, but he simply moved to the window and stood with his back to her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. "I'm not afraid." The lie came automatically. "Yes, you are, and you have every right to be." He turned to face her, and she was surprised by the exhaustion in his expression. "Your father didn't give you much choice in this arrangement, did you?" A bitter smile crossed his features. "Choice is an illusion for people like us, Evelyn. We're born into obligations we didn't create and debts we didn't accumulate." She picked up one of the jewelry pieces from the vanity, a brooch with an intricate silver design. The symbol was identical to the one on her mother's necklace, the one she had noticed for the first time just weeks before. "This symbol," she said, holding up the brooch. "What does it mean?" Darian's expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral. "It's a family crest. Very old. My mother had jewelry with the same symbol." "Did she?" His tone was too casual, too controlled. Evelyn set the brooch down and faced him directly. "What aren't you telling me? What did my father mean about your sister?" For a moment, she thought he might answer. Then his walls went up again, the same way her father's always did. "Some conversations are better left for another day. When will you stop speaking in riddles and tell me why I'm really here?" Darian crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. When he reached up to touch her cheek, his fingers were gentle, and Evelyn felt something she absolutely hadn't expected. Attraction. "You're here because sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor," he said softly. "And sometimes the worst circumstances lead to unexpected possibilities." His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Evelyn found herself leaning into the touch despite everything logical in her mind screaming warnings. "What kind of possibilities?" "The kind that terrify me." Before she could respond, he stepped back, the spell broken. "You should rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss more practical matters." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Evelyn, whatever you think you know about your family, about mine, about why we're here, be careful how deep you dig. Some truths are more dangerous than lies." After he left, Evelyn sat on the edge of the massive bed, still wearing her wedding dress, staring at the Blackwell family jewelry. The symbol on the brooch seemed to stare back, holding secrets she was only beginning to realize she needed to uncover. Outside, the ocean crashed against the cliffs below Raven's Hollow, and Evelyn wondered what other storms were coming. "You can't stay locked in this room forever." Evelyn didn't look up from the book she was pretending to read as Darian's voice carried through the master bedroom door. 3 days had passed since their arrival at his Newport estate, and she had successfully avoided him by claiming fatigue from the wedding and travel. "I'm not locked in. I'm choosing to stay in." "The door isn't locked from this side either." His dry humor caught her off guard, and she found herself almost smiling before remembering she was supposed to be maintaining distance between them. The attraction she had felt on their wedding night was dangerous, a complication she couldn't afford when so many questions remained unanswered. "Mrs. Chun has prepared lunch on the terrace," Darian continued. "You should eat something substantial. You barely touched dinner last night." I'm fine. No, you're not. You're hiding. That stung because it was true. Evelyn set down her book and moved to the door, yanking it open to find Darian leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The informal clothes made him seem more approachable and somehow more dangerous. I'm not hiding. I'm adjusting. To what exactly? To being married to a stranger who speaks in cryptic warnings and refuses to answer direct questions. Darian straightened, and she caught a flash of something that might have been hurt in his expression before it disappeared behind his usual controlled mask. Fair enough. Come to lunch, and I'll try to be more forthcoming. Try. Some subjects require more trust than we've built yet. Evelyn studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only a carefully maintained neutrality that frustrated her. Everything about Darian Blackwell was designed to keep people at a distance, yet she had felt genuine connection in their brief moments of contact. Fine, but I want real answers, not more riddles. The Newport estate was smaller than Raven's Hollow, but no less impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Narragansett Bay, and the interior design balanced modern comfort with classical elegance. Evelyn had to admit it was beautiful, even if it felt like a luxurious prison. Lunch was served on a stone terrace surrounded by carefully manicured gardens. Mrs. Chun, the housekeeper, had prepared a spread that could have fed 6 people, and Evelyn realized she was genuinely hungry for the first time since the wedding. Tell me about your sister, she said without preamble as soon as they were seated. Darian paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. Subtle. You promised to be more forthcoming. I said I'd try. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. Serafina was 2 years older than me. She died in what was ruled an accidental drowning 5 years ago. But you don't believe it was accidental? No, I don't. Why not? Darian was quiet for so long that Evelyn thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Serafina was investigating certain business practices that some people preferred to keep private. She had been asking questions, making inquiries that made powerful people nervous. What kind of business practices? The kind that involve moving money through channels that don't officially exist. Money laundering. Evelyn felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. And you think these people killed her to stop her investigation? I think my sister was too smart and too careful to accidentally drown in calm water 20 feet from shore. Evelyn absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with what she knew about her own family's situation. What does any of this have to do with my father? With our marriage? That's where the trust issue becomes relevant. Darian. Her use of his first name seemed to affect him. His careful composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. Your father knew Serafina. They had business dealings in the past. What kind of business dealings? The kind he's apparently never mentioned to you. Frustrated with the circular conversation, Evelyn stood abruptly. I'm going to explore the house. Maybe I'll find answers in your furniture since you won't give them to me directly. She expected him to object or try to stop her, but Darian simply nodded. 3rd floor is off limits. Everything else is yours to investigate. His easy permission made her suspicious, but she wasn't about to waste the opportunity. The house was larger than it appeared from outside, with multiple wings and levels that connected through elegant hallways lined with artwork. Most of the pieces were modern abstracts or landscapes, expensive but unremarkable. It wasn't until she discovered the narrow staircase behind a door she had assumed was a closet that things became interesting. The stairs led to a small, windowless room that felt more like a private study than part of the main house. The walls were lined with paintings, but these were different from the rest of Darian's collection. Older, more personal, with an intensity that made the space feel intimate and secretive. Evelyn moved slowly around the room, studying each piece. The paintings shared a similar style, delicate brushwork, and careful attention to light that suggested a single artist. Most depicted scenes of nature or abstract compositions, but several were portraits of people she didn't recognize. Then she reached the far wall and stopped breathing. The painting showed 2 young women sitting together in what looked like a garden setting. One was dark-haired and elegant, with serious eyes and a thoughtful expression. The other was lighter, with warm brown hair and a gentle smile that Evelyn recognized immediately despite the youthful face. Her mother. The painting was signed in the bottom right corner with delicate script, S.B. Serafina Blackwell. Evelyn sank into the chair positioned in front of the painting, her mind racing. Her mother had known Darian's sister well enough to pose for a portrait with her. They looked comfortable together, familiar, like close friends rather than casual acquaintances. "You found my gallery." Evelyn spun around to find Darian standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "That's my mother," she said, pointing at the painting. "With your sister." "Yes." They were friends. Best friends, according to Serafina's journals. Evelyn felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Another piece of her family's history that Augustus had never mentioned. Another connection that explained nothing while raising a dozen new questions. How is that possible? My father never mentioned knowing any Blackwells before this marriage arrangement. Darian entered the room and moved to stand beside her chair, both of them looking at the painting of their dead family members. "Your father has been very selective about which parts of the past he shares with you. But why? What's the point of hiding a friendship? Maybe because it wasn't just a friendship. Maybe because what happened to Serafina and Cordelia is connected." Evelyn's heart stopped. "What happened to Cordelia?" "My mother died in a car accident." Darian looked down at her with something that might have been pity. "Did she?" The simple question shattered everything Evelyn thought she knew about her family, her past, and the reasons she was sitting in a hidden room staring at evidence of secrets that reached back decades. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and she realized the beautiful afternoon was about to become a storm. The black cocktail dress felt like armor as Evelyn adjusted the straps one final time. 3 days had passed since her discovery of the hidden gallery. 3 days of Darian deflecting her questions about her mother's death with the same maddening skill her father used. "You look stunning." Darian appeared in the bedroom doorway wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. "Ready for Boston? Ready to get answers?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Tonight is business, Evelyn. The Children's Hospital Foundation Gala is important for maintaining certain relationships. Relationships with people who might have known my mother and your sister. Relationships with people who write very large checks for worthy causes." The drive to Boston took 90 minutes, giving Evelyn plenty of time to study her husband's profile as he navigated evening traffic. Darian had been polite but distant since her discovery of the paintings, treating her like a house guest rather than a wife. The careful barriers he maintained were beginning to feel less like protection and more like rejection. The Fairmont Copley Plaza ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewelry of Boston's social elite. Evelyn recognized the type of event immediately. She had attended similar functions in Charleston before her family's financial troubles became impossible to hide. The difference was that here, she was Mrs. Darian Blackwell, which apparently carried significant weight. "Darian, darling." The voice was honey over steel, and Evelyn turned to see a woman approaching with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to being the most beautiful person in any room. Platinum blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, designer gown that probably cost more than most people's cars, and ice blue eyes that cataloged Evelyn's appearance with calculating precision. "Victoria." Darian's tone was carefully neutral. "I wasn't sure you'd be attending tonight. I wouldn't miss it. The foundation means so much to me." Victoria's smile was perfect and completely fake. "And you must be the new Mrs. Blackwell." "I'm Victoria Ashford." Recognition hit Evelyn like cold water. This was the woman who had helped prepare her for the wedding, who had spoken about submission and accepting circumstances. She had never mentioned being Darian's ex-fiancée. "We've met," Evelyn said carefully, "though you left out some relevant details about your relationship with my husband." Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. "Ancient history, dear. Darian and I have moved far beyond such pedestrian concerns." She turned to Darian with practiced intimacy. "Haven't we, darling?" "Victoria." The warning in Darian's voice was subtle but unmistakable. "Oh, don't be so serious. I'm sure Evelyn understands that sophisticated marriages often involve complex histories." Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. After all, she's intelligent enough to recognize when practical arrangements serve everyone's interests. "What do you mean by that?" Evelyn asked. "Simply that Darian has always been very strategic in his personal relationships. He doesn't make emotional decisions." Victoria moved closer to Darian, her hand briefly touching his arm. "Do you, darling?" Evelyn felt heat rising in her chest. a jealousy that caught her completely off guard. She barely knew Darian, had no claim on his affections or loyalty, yet watching Victoria touch him with such familiarity made her want to step between them. "If you'll excuse me," Evelyn said tightly, "I need some air." She headed for the terrace before either of them could respond, needing space to process the emotions churning through her system. The cool October evening helped clear her head, but it didn't erase Victoria's insinuations about strategic relationships and practical arrangements. Running away? Darian's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him silhouetted in the doorway. "Getting perspective. On what? On whether my husband married me for business reasons, or because I'm somehow connected to his sister's investigation." Darian stepped onto the terrace, closing the distance between them until she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "Does it matter? Of course it matters. I may have been forced into this marriage, but I'd prefer to know if my husband considers me a business asset or a person." "What would you prefer me to consider you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications that made Evelyn's pulse quicken. She was acutely aware of how close he was standing, how the evening breeze carried his scent, how his formal attire made him look like he belonged in some expensive fantasy. "I'd prefer honesty. Honesty can be dangerous, more dangerous than lies." Darian reached up to touch her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone the same way he had on their wedding night. This time, instead of stepping away, he moved closer. "Honestly, I married you because your father owed a debt that needed settling. But I'm standing here now because you're the most fascinating woman I've ever met, and that terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because caring about someone makes you vulnerable, and vulnerable people make mistakes that get them killed." His words should have been frightening, but instead they sent heat spiraling through Evelyn's system. The careful control he maintained was slipping, revealing something raw and hungry underneath. "Maybe some risks are worth taking." "Are they?" Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him. The contact was electric, nothing like the ceremonial brush of lips at their wedding. Darian's arms came around her immediately, pulling her against him as the kiss deepened into something desperate and consuming. Evelyn felt like she was falling and flying simultaneously, every nerve ending alive with sensation. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This complicates things," Darian said against her forehead. "Good. I'm tired of simple." He laughed, the sound surprising them both. "Simple was never an option with you." "Darian." Victoria's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "The auction is beginning." They stepped apart reluctantly, the spell broken but not forgotten. As they returned to the ballroom, Evelyn caught Victoria watching them with an expression that promised trouble. The drive home was charged with unspoken tension. Every casual touch as Darian helped her from the car sent sparks through Evelyn's system, and she found herself studying his hands, his mouth, the strong line of his jaw in the dashboard lights. Back at the Newport house, they climbed the stairs together in silence that felt heavy with possibility. At the master bedroom door, Darian paused. "Evelyn." "Yes." "What happened tonight?" "It changes things between us." "I know. I need you to be sure you want those changes. Because once we cross certain lines, there's no going back to being strangers." Evelyn looked at this man who had been forced into her life, who held secrets that connected to her deepest pain, who kissed her like she was precious and dangerous simultaneously. "I stopped wanting to be strangers the moment I saw that painting of my mother." Darian's control finally cracked completely. He backed her against the bedroom door, his mouth finding hers with a hunger that spoke of weeks of restraint finally breaking free. "Then stop running from me," he whispered against her lips. "Only if you stop lying to me." "Deal." The word was barely audible before his mouth claimed hers again, and Evelyn realized she was about to discover what it meant to play with fire. Evelyn woke to the sound of rain against the windows and the realization that she was alone in the massive bed. The pillow beside her still held the indent of Darian's head, and the sheets carried his scent, but her husband was nowhere to be found. After their breakthrough on the terrace and the passionate kiss that had followed, she had expected things to change between them. Instead, Darian had pulled back into his controlled distance, claiming urgent business calls that kept him away from the bedroom until she fell asleep. The pattern continued for 3 days. Polite conversation over breakfast, careful avoidance of physical contact, and a return to the maddening evasiveness that made her want to shake him. Whatever progress they had made in Boston seemed to have evaporated. Frustrated and determined to find answers on her own, Evelyn returned to the hidden gallery. If Serafina and her mother had been close friends, there might be more evidence of their relationship among the paintings. She was examining the signatures on several pieces when she noticed something odd about the frame holding her mother's portrait. The backing seemed loose, as if it had been removed and replaced multiple times. Careful investigation revealed a small catch that, when pressed, released a hidden compartment. Inside were letters. Evelyn's hands trembled as she unfolded the first envelope, addressed to Serafina in her mother's familiar handwriting. The postmark was dated just months before Cordelia's death. My dearest Sarah, I found additional documentation that supports your suspicions about Isaiah. The transactions you flagged are definitely moving through accounts that don't exist on any official records. More concerning, I discovered my own family name attached to several transfers that I never authorized. Augustus claims ignorance, but his behavior suggests otherwise. We need to meet in person. This is bigger than we thought, and I'm starting to fear for our safety. All my love, Cordelia. Evelyn sank into the chair, her mind reeling. Isaiah, Augustus's involvement. Unauthorized transactions. The letters painted a picture of her mother as an active participant in investigating financial crimes, not the fragile woman who died in a tragic accident. The second letter was even more damning. Sarah, I confronted Augustus about the transfers, and his reaction confirmed our worst fears. He's been involved with Isaiah's schemes for years, moving money through our accounts to legitimize illegal activities. When I threatened to expose everything, he became desperate. I think he's planning to silence me permanently. If something happens to me, promise me you'll protect Evelyn. She's innocent in all this, and she deserves to know the truth when she's old enough to handle it. The evidence is hidden where only she would think to look. Watch over her, my dear friend. Cordelia. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. Her mother hadn't died in an accident. She had been murdered by her own husband to protect a criminal conspiracy that apparently still existed. What are you doing? Darian's voice made her jump, the letters scattering from her hands. He stood in the doorway with an expression she had never seen before, something between panic and fury. Reading about how my father killed my mother, Evelyn said, her voice hollow with shock. Darian crossed the room quickly, gathering the letters with urgent efficiency. You shouldn't have found these. Why? Because they prove your sister was right about everything? Because they show my father is a murderer? Because they put you in danger. From whom? From people who killed 2 women to protect their secrets and won't hesitate to kill a third. Evelyn stood on unsteady legs, anger beginning to cut through her shock. How long have you known? How long have you been sitting on evidence that my father murdered my mother? Evelyn, answer me. How long? Darian's jaw worked silently for a moment. Since before our wedding. The admission hit her like a physical blow. You knew, and you married me anyway. I married you to protect you. From my own father? From Isaiah Crowe and everyone else involved in this conspiracy. Isaiah Crowe. The name felt foreign on her tongue. Who is he? The Blackwell family attorney. The man who orchestrated your mother's death and my sister's murder. The man who's been using both our families to launder money for criminal organizations. And my father works for him. Your father is being blackmailed by him. There's a difference. Evelyn laughed bitterly. Is there? My mother is still dead either way. Your father made terrible choices, but Isaiah Crowe is the real enemy here. Then why haven't you exposed him? Why haven't you gone to the police with this evidence? Darian's expression darkened. Because Isaiah Crowe has connections that reach into law enforcement, the courts, and government agencies. Because every time someone gets close to exposing him, they end up dead. Because the only way to bring him down is to gather enough evidence that he can't escape or eliminate. And I'm what bait? You're the key to everything. Serafina believed your mother hid additional evidence before her death, something that could finally destroy Isaiah's entire operation. What kind of evidence? We don't know, but according to these letters, it's hidden somewhere only you would think to look. Evelyn stared at him, trying to process the implications. Her entire life had been built on lies. Her mother's death, her father's financial troubles, even her marriage were all connected to a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed 2 families. You should have told me from the beginning. Would you have believed me? Would you have cooperated if I had told you on our wedding night that your father helped murder your mother? She wanted to say yes, but honestly wasn't sure. The revelations were almost too enormous to accept even now, with evidence literally in her hands. Mrs. Blackwell. Mrs. Chin's voice carried up from the main floor, interrupting their confrontation. Your father is here to see you. He seems quite agitated. Evelyn and Darian exchanged sharp glances. Augustus arriving unannounced could only mean trouble. They found him pacing in the main parlor, his usually composed demeanor completely shattered. When he saw Evelyn, relief flooded his features before being replaced by desperate urgency. Thank God you're safe. We need to leave immediately. Leave for where? Evelyn demanded. Somewhere Isaiah can't find us. He knows about the letters, Evelyn. He knows Cordelia hid evidence. How does he know? Augustus glanced at Darian with something that might have been guilt. Because I told him. The confession hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. You told him, Evelyn repeated slowly. You told the man who murdered my mother that evidence exists to expose him. He threatened to destroy you, Evelyn. To fabricate evidence that would send you to prison for crimes you didn't commit. I had no choice. You always have a choice, Darian said coldly. You've just consistently chosen to protect yourself instead of your daughter. That's not true, isn't it? You gave her to me in marriage to settle debts you accumulated working for Isaiah. You stayed silent about Cordelia's murder for 12 years. You just revealed the existence of evidence that could bring down a killer because you were afraid of consequences. Darian's voice was deadly quiet. When exactly have you chosen Evelyn over your own interests? Augustus flinched as if he had been struck. Everything I've done has been to protect her. By lying to her about everything that matters? By keeping her ignorant of things that could get her killed? Well, congratulations, Evelyn said, her voice shaking with rage. Your protection just painted a target on my back. Outside, car doors slammed in the driveway. Through the windows, Evelyn could see black SUVs pulling up to the house. Too late, Augustus whispered. Darian was already moving, grabbing Evelyn's hand and pulling her toward the back of the house. There's a boat at the dock. We can reach it through the garden. What about my father? What about him? Evelyn looked back at Augustus. This man who had shaped her entire life through lies and cowardice, who had just delivered her to people who wanted her dead. For the first time in her life, she chose to leave him behind. Rain soaked through their clothes as they ran through the garden toward the dock, sirens wailing in the distance, and the sound of doors being kicked in echoing from the house behind them. The game had changed, and Evelyn was no longer a pawn. She was a target. The boat cut through choppy harbor waters while Evelyn struggled to process what had just happened. Behind them, Newport's lights flickered through the rain, and she could see emergency vehicles converging on Darian's estate. Her father was back there somewhere, probably in custody or worse. Where are we going? She shouted over the engine noise. Safe house in Maine. Darian's hands were steady on the wheel despite the rough seas. We'll have time to regroup there. Time to regroup for what? Our lives just imploded. Your life imploded 12 years ago when your mother was murdered. Everything since then has been borrowed time. The brutal honesty hit her like cold spray. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in her soaked clothes, and trying to accept that everything she thought she knew had been an illusion. The safe house turned out to be a weathered cottage perched on granite cliffs north of Bar Harbor. No neighbors, no lights visible in any direction, just the sound of waves crashing against rocks below. Darian secured the boat to a private dock, while Evelyn climbed wooden steps that seemed carved into the cliff face. Inside, the cottage was surprisingly comfortable, with a stone fireplace and rustic furniture that suggested it had been prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. Darian immediately began checking windows and activating what appeared to be a sophisticated security system. How many safe houses do you have? Evelyn asked. Enough. He handed her a towel and dry clothes from a closet. Change into these. We need to talk. When she emerged from the small bedroom wearing oversized sweats, Darian had started a fire and was studying files spread across the kitchen table. In the firelight, his expression was grim and determined. Sit down, he said without looking up. It's time you knew everything. Evelyn approached the table cautiously, recognizing some of the documents from the hidden gallery along with others she had never seen. Financial records, photographs, what looked like surveillance reports. Your mother and Serafino weren't just investigating money laundering, Darian began. They discovered that Isaiah Crowe was running a human trafficking operation disguised as luxury real estate development. The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. Human trafficking. Young women mostly. Brought into the country through fake modeling agencies and domestic service programs, then sold to wealthy clients who wanted guaranteed silence and compliance. That's impossible. My family would never be involved in something like that. Darian pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a group of men in expensive suits standing in front of a construction site. Evelyn recognized her father immediately, along with two other men she didn't know. This was taken at the groundbreaking for the Magnolia Springs Resort project, the development that supposedly bankrupted your family. Supposedly, there never was a resort. The property was used as a staging area for moving trafficked women through Georgia and South Carolina. Your father provided legitimate business credentials to mask the operation. Evelyn stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the smiling man in the picture with the father who had raised her with lectures about honor and protecting the innocent. He couldn't have known what he was really involved in. Couldn't he? Darian pulled out more documents. Bank transfers show payments to Augustus Thorne over a period of 3 years. Substantial payments for services that generated no visible business activity. Maybe he was being blackmailed then too. Maybe. Or maybe he was a willing participant until your mother discovered the truth. The possibility that her father had knowingly profited from human suffering was almost too horrible to consider. Evelyn pushed the documents away, unable to look at more evidence of her family's involvement in atrocities. Why are you showing me this? What does any of it have to do with why you married me? Darian leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since she had known him, his carefully maintained control completely cracked. Because Serafina believed that Cordelia wasn't the only witness to Isaiah's operation. She believed that a child might have seen something, overheard something, that could provide the final piece of evidence needed to bring down the entire network. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. You think I witnessed something when I was 12. I think you were in the house the night your mother confronted your father about the trafficking operation. I think you saw or heard things that you've spent 12 years trying to forget. So you married me to access my repressed memories. I married you because you were the only living person who might be able to identify everyone involved in my sister's murder. The confession hung between them like a blade. Evelyn felt something breaking inside her chest, a pain that went deeper than betrayal. Everything between us has been a lie. No. Darian stood abruptly, moving around the table toward her. What I told you in Boston was true. I may have married you for strategic reasons, but what I feel for you now has nothing to do with strategy. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say? Because I'm telling you the truth now when I could have kept lying. Because I'm risking everything to keep you safe instead of using you to get what I want. Evelyn backed away from him, needing space to think. Her entire identity was built on being Augustus Thorne's beloved daughter, Cordelia Thorne's precious child, the innocent heir to a respectable Southern family. Learning that she was actually the daughter of criminals, a potential witness to human trafficking, married to a man who had initially seen her as evidence rather than a person, was devastating. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't be what you need me to be. You don't have to be anything except yourself. Myself? I don't even know who that is anymore. My father is a criminal. My mother was murdered. My husband married me to solve a case. Who am I in any of this? Darian closed the distance between them despite her retreat, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. You're the woman who challenged me from the moment we met. You're brave enough to demand answers even when they destroy everything you thought you knew. You're strong enough to walk away from your father when he betrayed you. His thumbs traced along her cheekbones, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression. You're the person I never expected to fall in love with. Love. The word came out broken. Completely. Helplessly. Inconveniently. His forehead touched hers. I love you, Evelyn. Not as evidence, or a witness, or a strategic asset. I love you as the woman who makes me want to be better than the man I was before I met you. Darian, I know I don't deserve it. I know I've lied to you and used you and put you in danger. But I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn the right to keep loving you. The words should have healed something, but instead they made the pain worse. How could she trust love built on deception? How could she believe promises from a man who had hidden the truth about everything that mattered? I need time, she said finally. We don't have time. Isaiah knows we have the letters. He knows you're connected to evidence that could destroy him. Every minute we wait gives him more opportunity to find us. Then what do you propose we do? We recover the evidence your mother hid. We expose Isaiah and everyone working with him. We finish what Serafina and Cordelia started. And if I can't remember what I witnessed? If there's nothing to recover? Darian's expression hardened with determination that was both frightening and reassuring. Then we make them pay anyway. Outside, lightning illuminated the storm-tossed ocean, and Evelyn realized they were about to step into an even bigger tempest. One that would either destroy them both or forge them into something stronger than the sum of their broken parts. But first, she had to decide if she was brave enough to trust the man who had shattered her world in order to save it. Dr. Sarah Whitmore arrived at the main safe house before dawn, carrying a leather briefcase and the kind of calm competence that came from dealing with traumatic memories professionally. Darian had contacted her during the night, and Evelyn was both grateful for his initiative and resentful that he continued making decisions without consulting her. Hypnotherapy can be effective for recovering suppressed memories, Dr. Whitmore explained as she set up recording equipment in the cottage's main room. But you need to understand that what you remember may be fragmented, confusing, or extremely distressing. More distressing than learning my father helped murder my mother? Evelyn asked dryly. Potentially, yes. Childhood trauma creates protective mechanisms for good reasons. Removing those protections can be destabilizing. Evelyn glanced at Darian, who stood near the window scanning the tree-line with obvious tension. They had barely spoken since his confession of love the night before. Both of them focused on survival rather than examining the wreckage of trust between them. I need to remember, Evelyn said finally. Whatever the cost. The session began slowly, Dr. Whitmore's voice guiding Evelyn into a relaxed state, while rain continued pattering against the cottage windows. At first, nothing came except vague impressions of being 12 years old, the loneliness after her mother's death, the way Augustus had seemed to age overnight. Then Dr. Whitmore asked her to focus on the week before Cordelia's accident. I can see the kitchen, Evelyn said, her voice taking on a younger cadence. Mama's making my favorite cookies, but she keeps checking her phone. She seems worried about something. What kind of worry? Scared worried. Like when thunder gets too close. Evelyn's breathing quickened. She keeps looking out the window, checking the locks. She tells me to pack a suitcase, just some clothes for a few days. Where were you going? To visit Aunt Margaret in Atlanta. But we've never visited Aunt Margaret before. The memories were flowing faster now, details emerging with startling clarity. Daddy comes home early from work. He's angry. They start fighting in his study. Can you hear what they're saying? Evelyn's face contorted with concentration and distress. Mama's crying. She says he promised it was just business, just moving money. She says there are girls, young girls, and she can't pretend not to know anymore. Darian moved closer, his expression tense. Daddy says it's too late to get out. He says Isaiah will destroy us if we try to leave. Evelyn's voice cracked. Mama says Isaiah already destroyed us. We just didn't know it yet. What happens next? Dr. Whitmore asked gently. I'm supposed to be in bed, but I sneak downstairs to get water. I hear Daddy on the phone with someone. He's saying Cordelia won't listen to reason, that she's going to ruin everything. He's asking what they want him to do. Tears were streaming down Evelyn's face now, 12 years of suppressed trauma pouring out. Then what? The next morning, Mama hugs me extra tight before school. She whispers that no matter what happens, I should remember that she loves me and that some secrets are too dangerous to keep. Evelyn's voice became a whisper. That afternoon, the police come to school to tell me there was an accident. But you didn't believe it was an accident. No, because that night, I heard Daddy on the phone again. He was thanking someone, saying it was better this way, cleaner, saying now Evelyn would never have to know what her mother discovered. The revelation hung in the air like poison. Even Dr. Whitmore looked shaken by the clarity of the recovered memories. There's something else, Evelyn continued, still deep in the hypnotic state. Mama had a hiding place. Behind her jewelry box, there was a loose board. She put something there the night before she died, something in a manila envelope. Do you know what it was? Photos. Papers. She whispered to her jewelry box like she was praying. She said, someday Evelyn will understand why I had to do this. Someday she'll know the truth. Dr. Whitmore gently brought Evelyn out of the hypnotic state, but the memories remained vivid and devastating. Her father hadn't just been a passive victim of blackmail. He had actively participated in her mother's murder. "I need to get that envelope," Evelyn said, wiping tears from her face. "It's too dangerous," Darian replied immediately. "Isaiah's people will be watching Magnolia Springs. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are." Before Darian could argue, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Victoria Ashford. "Don't answer it," Evelyn said instinctively. "I have to. She might have information about your father." Darian put the call on speaker. "Hello, Victoria." "Darian, darling. I hope you and your lovely wife are enjoying your little vacation." Victoria's voice was silk over steel. "Though I'm afraid your accommodations may be about to change." "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. To see justice done." There was a pause. Then Victoria's tone shifted to something colder. "Isaiah and I have your father-in-law, Evelyn. Augustus is proving quite cooperative now that he understands the full scope of his situation." Evelyn's blood turned to ice. "We know about the envelope Cordelia hid. We know you've recovered certain inconvenient memories. And we know exactly where you are, thanks to the GPS tracker in Dr. Whitmore's briefcase." Dr. Whitmore paled, checking her case with trembling hands. "You have 1 hour to bring yourselves to the coordinates I'm sending to Darian's phone. Come alone, bring no weapons, and perhaps Augustus will live to see another sunrise. Attempt to involve law enforcement, and I'll ensure his death is neither quick nor painless." "Victoria, you don't have to do this," Darian said, but the line had already gone dead. They stared at each other in the sudden silence, the weight of their impossible situation crushing down around them. "It's a trap," Dr. Whitmore said unnecessarily. "Of course it's a trap," Evelyn replied. "But he's still my father. Your father who helped murder your mother. Your father who delivered you to people who want you dead. My father who's suffering for mistakes he can't undo." Evelyn stood up, her decision made. "I can't let him die, no matter what he's done. Even if saving him gets you killed? Even then." Darian studied her face, seeing the determination that reminded him why he had fallen in love with her despite every logical reason to maintain his distance. "Then we go get him," he said quietly. "Together." "Darian, no. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is. It became my fight the moment I married you. It became my fight the moment I fell in love with you." He moved to the weapons cabinet hidden behind the bookshelf. "Victoria and Isaiah want to end this tonight? Fine. Let's end it." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Maine coast, and Evelyn realized they were about to walk into the kind of darkness that either destroyed people completely or forged them into something unbreakable. The only question was which outcome they would choose. The coordinates led to an abandoned lighthouse on a rocky promontory 20 miles north of Bar Harbor. Waves crashed against the jagged coastline below while storm clouds rolled in from the Atlantic, turning the late afternoon sky the color of old bruises. Evelyn checked the pistol Darian had given her one final time, though they both knew this confrontation would be decided by intelligence rather than firepower. Isaiah and Victoria had chosen the location specifically for its isolation and defensive advantages. "Remember the plan," Darian said as they approached the lighthouse on foot, having abandoned their vehicle a mile away. "We get your father out first, worry about everything else second. And if we can't get him out, then we make sure his sacrifice means something." The lighthouse door stood open, an obvious invitation into what could only be a trap. Inside, spiral stairs led up through the tower, while voices echoed from somewhere above. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs as they climbed, each step bringing them closer to a confrontation that would determine whether her family's legacy would be justice or tragedy. They found them on the observation deck at the top of the lighthouse. Augustus sat tied to a chair near the railing, his face bruised but his eyes alert. Victoria stood beside him with a gun pointed at his head, while Isaiah Crow paced near the opposite wall like a caged predator. In person, Isaiah was smaller than Evelyn had expected, a neat man in an expensive suit with gray hair and cold eyes that cataloged threats with professional calculation. He looked more like a banker than a killer, which somehow made him more frightening. "Mrs. Blackwell," Isaiah said pleasantly as they emerged from the stairwell. "Thank you for joining us. I trust your journey wasn't too unpleasant." "Let my father go," Evelyn said without preamble. "Straight to business. I admire that." Isaiah smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Unfortunately, Augustus has become something of a liability. His conscience has developed at the most inconvenient time. He's already suffered enough for his mistakes. Has he? Augustus has profited from my operations for years. His plantation provided legitimate business credentials for moving human cargo. His bank accounts laundered millions in criminal proceeds. Isaiah's voice remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. I'd say his suffering has barely begun. Darian stepped slightly forward, drawing Isaiah's attention. What do you want? The same thing I've always wanted. Silence. Compliance. The continuation of profitable business relationships without interference from idealistic crusaders. Isaiah gestured toward Augustus. Your father-in-law understands this now. Unfortunately, recent events suggest that you and your wife may prove less cooperative. We're here, Victoria said, her voice tight with impatience. Let's finish this. Patience, my dear. Business requires proper attention to detail. Isaiah turned back to Evelyn. Your mother left evidence of our operations hidden somewhere. I want it recovered and destroyed. And then what? You kill us anyway? That depends entirely on your willingness to accept certain realities. Isaiah pulled out his own weapon, a chrome pistol that gleamed in the lighthouse's harsh lighting. Your mother and Darian's sister made the mistake of believing they could expose our operations and emerge unscathed. They learned otherwise. You murdered them. I eliminated threats to a business enterprise that employs hundreds of people and generates substantial economic activity. Their deaths were regrettable but necessary. The casual admission of murder hit Evelyn like a physical blow. This man had destroyed her family, ruined countless lives, and showed no more remorse than if he had been discussing quarterly earnings. Where is the evidence? Isaiah continued. I'll show you, Evelyn said, but only after you release my father. I'm afraid that's not how negotiations work. Then we have a problem. Isaiah studied her face, apparently recognizing something that made him recalculate his approach. You know what I find fascinating about family loyalty, Mrs. Blackwell? It makes people predictably irrational. He moved the gun from Augustus to point directly at Evelyn. Victoria, please demonstrate the consequences of uncooperative behavior. Victoria's finger tightened on her trigger, but before she could fire, Augustus threw himself sideways in his chair. The sudden movement spoiled her aim, and the bullet shattered the lighthouse window instead of finding its target. The distraction was all Darian needed. He lunged forward, tackling Isaiah while Evelyn dove toward Victoria. The observation deck erupted into chaos as three people fought with desperate intensity while Augustus struggled against his restraints. Evelyn's training in self-defense, rusty from years of disuse, came flooding back as she grappled with Victoria for control of the gun. The older woman was stronger than she looked, but desperation gave Evelyn advantages that technique couldn't match. You stupid little girl, Victoria snarled as they crashed into the lighthouse railing. You have no idea what you're destroying. Good, Evelyn gasped, managing to twist the gun away from her body. It deserves to be destroyed. Meanwhile, Darian and Isaiah circled each other with the deadly focus of predators. Isaiah's legal background had apparently included training in personal combat, but Darian's motivation went deeper than professional obligation. You killed my sister, Darian said, landing a blow that sent Isaiah staggering. Your sister killed herself when she refused to mind her own business. She was trying to save people you were selling like property. I was providing a service to willing customers. The girls were compensated for their work. They were trafficked victims. They were inventory. The word triggered something savage in Darian's expression. His next attack was so violent that Isaiah's gun went flying across the deck, clattering out of reach. Evelyn's fight with Victoria ended when she managed to break free and deliver a knee strike that doubled the other woman over. Victoria's gun skittered toward the broken window, and Evelyn kicked it the rest of the way through. It's over, she announced, breathing hard. No, Augustus said from his chair, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. It's not over until we expose everything. Until everyone involved pays for what they've done. Isaiah, cornered and disarmed, laughed bitterly. You think destroying me ends this? I'm one small part of a much larger operation. Kill me, and someone else takes my place within a week. Maybe, Darian said, zip-tying Isaiah's hands behind his back with practiced efficiency. But at least the girls you've already trafficked will have a chance at justice. What girls? Isaiah's composure finally cracked. You have no evidence. No witnesses. No way to prove anything beyond Serafina's paranoid theories. Actually, we do. The voice came from the stairwell, and Evelyn turned to see Special Agent Maria Santos of the FBI climbing onto the observation deck, followed by a team of federal agents. Dr. Whitmore's distress beacon activated when her briefcase was tampered with, Agent Santos explained. We've been listening to your conversation for the past 10 minutes. Isaiah's face went white as he realized the scope of his exposure. The trafficking operation you just confessed to running, the murders you just admitted committing, the money laundering scheme you described, all recorded and admissible in federal court. Agent Santos smiled grimly. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a maximum security facility. Victoria tried to run for the stairwell, but 2 agents intercepted her before she made it 3 steps. As the FBI processed the crime scene and took statements, Evelyn found herself alone with Augustus for the first time since learning the truth about his involvement in her mother's death. I know you can't forgive me, he said quietly. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. Your mother was a better person than I ever was. She tried to do the right thing, even when it cost her everything. Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you protect her? Augustus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the storm-tossed ocean. Because I was a coward. Because I convinced myself that keeping you safe meant keeping you ignorant. Because I chose the easy path instead of the right one. He looked at her with eyes full of regret. I failed your mother, and I failed you. But I'm grateful you turned out to be more like her than like me. What happens now? Now I cooperate fully with the FBI investigation. I testify against everyone involved in Isaiah's operation. I try to make amends for 20 years of cowardice. And then I face whatever consequences come from the choices I made. Evelyn studied her father's face, seeing genuine remorse for perhaps the first time in her life. It didn't erase the pain he had caused or bring back her mother, but it was a beginning. The evidence mother hid, she said finally. It's at Magnolia Springs, behind her jewelry box. There's a loose board. Augustus nodded slowly. I'll make sure the FBI recovers it. Every photograph, every document, every piece of evidence she gathered. It will all come to light. 3 hours later, Evelyn and Darian stood on the lighthouse deck, watching the FBI vehicles disappear down the coastal road. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky full of stars and the kind of clarity that only came after chaos. It's really over, Evelyn said. The criminal case is over. Isaiah and Victoria will spend decades in prison. The trafficking network will be dismantled. Darian moved closer, his arms sliding around her waist. But we still have things to work out between us. Do we? I lied to you. I married you for strategic reasons. I put you in danger to serve my own agenda. Yes, you did all of those things. But I also fell in love with you. Completely, irrevocably, inconveniently in love with you. Evelyn turned in his arms, studying his face in the starlight. The careful control was gone, replaced by vulnerability that made her heart ache. I know. Can you forgive me? Can you trust me enough to build something real together? I don't know, she said honestly. But I'm willing to try. That's all I can ask for. He kissed her then, and it tasted like promises and new beginnings and the possibility that love could indeed grow from the ashes of deception. 6 months later, they renewed their vows in a small ceremony at Magnolia Springs, which Evelyn had decided to convert into a safe house for trafficking survivors. Augustus, awaiting sentencing but cooperating fully with ongoing investigations, walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. This time, when Darian promised to love and protect her, Evelyn believed him completely. Because she had seen him keep those promises when it mattered most, when keeping them meant risking everything. As they danced beneath the magnolia trees where her mother had once played as a child, Evelyn realized that some stories required destruction before they could become beautiful. Some love required testing before it could become unbreakable. And sometimes, the end of everything was really just the beginning.